I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box, and you cannot compare them at all. So don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, yeah. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, woo. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. It is Tuesday. We are wrapping up Week 5. Neither Dennis nor I has been fired or benched yet, so we are here to go through all the games. But Dennis, it's been quite an interesting aftermath to the week.
You know, I find that like when my music kid is like not playing very well, my best response is to go and punish my sports kid, you know? So I think it's like Woody Johnson looked around and he's like, God dang it, our defense is playing so good under this defensive-minded head coach, but our offense stinks. So we're going to fire the defensive-minded head coach.
And not the GM, who quite apparently doesn't know what he's doing. But we will get to the sad, sorry Jets here pretty quickly. But first, Dennis, during our early Week 5 preview on Thursday night, it was turning out to be a heck of a game in Atlanta with the Buccaneers and the Falcons. It turned out to be quite a finish, going to overtime as Kirk Cousins set the single game passing record for the Falcons on a day when they put Matt Ryan into their Ring of Fame, and the Falcons got a 36-30 win over the Buccaneers. This is not the first time the Buccaneers defense has struggled a little bit. Is it becoming a problem?
Well, you know, I think what happens is they end up giving up big plays to generally good players. Nothing against, who was that, Kadarrell Hodge. But the Bucs defense, they're middle of the pack in total points. They're 5th worst passing defense and 17th worst versus the run. So they can be beat. And we saw that Thursday night. Kirk Cousins was able to get some big plays on him, and it allowed, you know, for us fantasy managers, it allowed Baker to have to play, and, you know, that's great for Godwin and Evans. And, you know, Darnell Mooney is, you know, I think league winner might be too strong, but he's severely outperforming his draft capital. We'll see if he can keep it up, if he can stay healthy. You know, I was on him a little bit in preseason, felt like he had a real good opportunity. And it was real easy for us to forget his second year. He did have over 1,000 yards receiving, you know, and then he would, you know, they transferred to Georgia Tech, and it was all run with Justin Fields, not a lot of passing there. So
Kirk Cousins, you know, we've had questions, a little bit of ups and downs. He looked a little rough coming back week 1, but threw it 58 times. Completed more than 40 of them, 509 yards, 4 touchdowns. Are you feeling better about him as a passer and in fantasy?
You know, as the weeks have went on, he's getting comfortable with the Achilles. Week 1, you know, it was all shotgun. I want time to react. He was playing scared, and you could tell. He just didn't seem like he had the confidence. After a couple weeks of getting hit and moving around, he's back to using the play action that he's so good at. He's settling in nicely. 58 pass attempts last week. I think that's probably more than Zach Robinson would like. And from a fantasy perspective, 50% of his targets went to Drake London and Darnell Mooney. So you love that narrow funnel. But they probably want it in the high 30s is probably more appropriate, in which case then, Mooney and London aren't going to get quite the same volume of target.
It's not getting quite the same volume, unfortunately. Yeah, I definitely had gotten to the point where I actually put Sam Darnold in over Kirk Cousins in a couple of places this week, and that came back to bite me in the ass.
October, Darnold turned into a pumpkin.
I mean, he was still fine. It just, speaking of Darnold, the London game, the New York Jets and the Minnesota Vikings clash there. The Vikings getting the 23-17 victory. Dennis, this offense for the Jets has not really looked better or taken off. Robert Saleh was fired today as head coach. They promoted the defensive coordinator to be the interim coach, but should Nathaniel Hackett and Aaron Rodgers kind of be on the hot seat? I mean, Rodgers throwing 3 killer interceptions, including 1 return for a touchdown.
It's not a great situation, and I don't know how much better it's going to get. It's unfortunately Father Time is undefeated, and while Rodgers' mind is willing, it's willing to do a lot of stuff. Apparently, it can get way the hell out there. I think sometimes he doesn't quite have the same mobility. He doesn't quite have the same arm. I do think that, now with Saleh gone, Nate Hackett, let's face it, it was Aaron Rodgers who's running this team now. And so Rodgers is going to call the plays he wants. He's going to run the plays he wants. He doesn't give 2 shits about whatever Nate Hackett sends in. I think it's, as much as I love Garrett Wilson, I think he's going to force the ball to Allen Lazard sometimes. And it's going to – I think Lazard is wheels up. I saw a blurb on Roto World today where at least 3 said something like 3 anonymous players basically said that Aaron Rodgers was the problem.
I mean, it wouldn't be a surprise. He was the problem in Green Bay too, as we quickly discovered. For the Vikings, Aaron Jones got injured in this game. They are on a bye in week 6, but if Jones is not healthy, how are we feeling about Ty Chandler? I know they credited the fumble to Darnold, but I watched that game. That was Ty Chandler muffing a straight-up toss. And he only had 14 carries for 30 yards. I was not very impressed by his ground game. Were you?
No. He's suited to be what he was before Aaron Jones got injured, which was 7 or 8 touches to give Aaron Jones a breather. He may pop off one. He may vulture the occasional touchdown. But he's just unfortunately not good enough to be the guy. If Jones misses a significant amount of time, he probably will be flex worthy just for volume. But we saw him give the ball to CJ Ham when they got down close, and so that may limit what his touchdown upside is going to be. I think we're getting close to TJ Hawkinson getting back, so that's going to take some more red zone away from whatever Chandler might get.
Hawkinson will be eligible when they come back off bye if they want to bring him back, and they had opened his window. So,
yeah, I'm hoping my league mates go out and spend their fab on Ty Chandler.
Yeah, same here. Next up, the Chicago Bears hosted the Carolina Panthers in a game where the Panthers had to be sitting there wondering what might have been. They got waxed 36-10. Andy Dalton did not play well and actually got relieved by Bryce Young. After a pretty good game when he first came out that first week, they have not been very successful, even with Andy Dalton. And this week was by far probably the most dreadful. Would they be well served to stick with Dalton, or do you think they should consider going back to Young? They aren't going into the playoffs if that's what they thought they were getting.
Well, I don't think that they thought in week 4 or 5, I think, you kind of hope you can right the ship. I think they're realistic and understand the team needs to be rebuilt. But as for whatever fade Dalton has had the last couple of weeks, the Bears' pass defense is pretty stout. They give up the seventh fewest yards, have the second lowest touchdown percent, and they get the eighth most sacks. So it was going to be a good matchup for the Bears defense against Dalton. And I think you keep riding Dalton in part because I think you need a veteran quarterback to develop Jonathan Mingo and Xavier Legette, and frankly, to keep Deontay Johnson happy.
I mean, I kind of disagree. They said the whole reason they made that change was because the season was slipping away and they were a playoff team. They're not a playoff team. They're 1-4. And if Andy Dalton's going to go out and look like what he did, why the fuck do you have him in there and not Bryce Young? I think they're the worst managed organization in all of professional sports at this point in time. They get what they get, but they should not be sticking with Dalton. On the flip side for Chicago, Caleb Williams, 20-29, 304 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Probably his best game, second time going over 300. Team's now 3-2. Are you feeling better about what we've seen from him the last few weeks after a little bit of a rough start?
Yeah, I think he's showed a little maturity. He's headed in the right direction. I don't think we want to get too far ahead of ourselves. I mean, the Panthers defense gives up the second highest touchdown percentage, and they get the second fewest sacks. So it's not like, this mobile quarterback back there is under a ton of pressure, and he'll be able to see things coming. I think it was a good matchup for Williams. And we talked all offseason about what they did with the wide receiver group there and bringing in Keenan Allen, drafting Rome Odunze, paying DJ Moore. They've got a stout wide receiver group, and it should be productive with even the most marginal quarterback. And Williams, by all accounts, has some pretty good natural talent. I think it looks like the game is slowing down a little bit for him. He looked overwhelmed in week 1, and some of that was pressure, but as the offensive line starts to gel, the running game starts to come together, as long as Allen and Odunze and Moore all stay healthy. Cole Kmet and Gerald Everett are both being productive.
I'd even need Keenan Allen. He's kind of been a non-factor, and they're still doing well. DeAndre Swift, all it took was me saying that he was a sit and washed for him to just show up and show out. So I would like some credit for that. It just
thanks.
I can't remember who I said to sit this week, and I even made a joke that they were probably going to go off, and I'm pretty sure that the wide receiver that I picked that I thought was dead sprung back to life. So you're welcome, America.
Thanks. I appreciate you.
From a game that wasn't very good to one that was one of the better ones of the weekend. Baltimore Ravens, Cincinnati Bengals end up going to overtime. Ravens pull out the 41-38 victory. Dennis, we know the rotation they've said at tight end is something they're working on in Baltimore. This week, we actually saw Charlie Kolar in there and getting some targets. Now, Mark Andrews did get 5 targets, caught 4 for 55, but Kolar, 4 targets, caught 3 for 64, and a touchdown. 2 more touchdowns go to Isaiah Likely, who only saw 3 targets, all of them in the red zone. What do you make of Charlie Kolar, and what do you make of this situation?
So I think Kolar he's kind of the heir apparent to Mark Andrews, and Mark Andrews is in what now, his 6th or 7th year. So, he's caught a lot of passes. He's taken a bit of a beating, and maybe it's just father time catching up with him. Second time I've said father time, so this must be my father time episode. But Kolar looked good coming out of Iowa State. He was a good prospect. He was a 4th-round draft pick. He doesn't have the athleticism that Likely has, but it wouldn't surprise me to see them make sure they re-sign him while they let Andrews kind of play out his contract and move on, and then they go forward with Likely and Kohler. Charlie Kohler was a good prospect coming out, and unfortunately, the Ravens have 3 good tight ends, and they're willing to use them all, which means it's playing whack-a-mole.
I do think he's worth picking up and stashing at this point, just because they've admitted that they're doing a tight end rotation, and we don't know what's going on with Mark Andrews. Meanwhile, the Bengals slumped 1-4. They have scored 25 or more points on offense each of the last 4 games, 30 or more points in each of the last 3 games, and yet only have 1 win. Is their season kind of already over?
I mean, I think they've got a better chance to make the playoffs than the 1-4 Carolina Panthers.
When you're talking about a negative percentage, then yes.
The defense is struggling in Cincinnati, which means it's probably time to fire their offensive-minded head coach. But so they've got a couple assets. If they want to shake things up, they could move T. Higgins. Playing on the franchise tag, they're not going to get near what his talent is worth. A running back needy team, they could move Zach Moss. Moss is sitting at RB20. Chase Brown is RB27 and looks to be he's the much more explosive, the more exciting back that you want in there. Brown is playing well on passing downs and in pass protection. But right now they've got a pretty even split in the backfield. So, I don't think you're not going to probably get too much for Higgins. And, if you can make the playoffs at, 9-8 or 8-9, which is possible, I think that, they're going to keep pushing, but ultimately, their investment in the offense has cost them on defense. And their defense that they, lots of teams, you have to make conscious decisions. You see it in Kansas City with their offensive line that they're like, well, we're just going to have to keep drafting good young offensive linemen every 4 years at each position because we just can't pay them when we're paying Patrick Mahomes $500 million. So you've got to make choices, and Cincinnati made their choice. Indianapolis did it for years with Peyton Manning. They would have 2 or 3 defenders, but across the board, their defense wasn't very good. They had all their money tied up in offense.
Bengals next couple, they're at the Giants, at the Browns, a couple of winnable games, but you might have said that about the Commanders, though, before they scored 33 at home and lost. Then they're at home against the Eagles. Then they got the Raiders, at the Ravens, at the Chargers. Gets them through November. I mean, I think there are a chance for them to bounce back, but they certainly, a team that a lot of people were riding as a potential Super Bowl contender, as Joe Burrow said, they're not a good team. No, they're not a championship team.
I don't think we're seeing a worst to first.
Miami Dolphins 15, New England Patriots 10. How should Miami feel about this victory?
I mean, you got to start somewhere, right?
Yeah. You'd like more than, 5 field goals, though, maybe?
But a win is a win. They were run heavy. They were productive in the run game. Jalen Wright looked good. Raheem Mostert looked good. They did lose Devin Achane to a concussion. They ran 41 running plays, 31 pass plays. The 6.25 yards per attempt was bottom third in the NFL, but it's an improvement for Huntley over his first start. And from a fantasy football perspective, 55% of the targets went to Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. And they do a lot of short passing game targets to Waddle and Hill. The timing just isn't quite the same as it is with Tua, and so they don't quite they're not breaking those big plays like they have in the past. But you can see it starting to gel just a little bit more getting a little bit closer. They just need to they need to continue to run the ball well. Let Tyler Huntley keep the seat warm until Tua comes back. I mean, he's coming back.
Well, a big week for him this week. He meets with the independent neurologist to see if he can be cleared. The Dolphins are on a bye this week, so before you go blowing all of your redraft fab on Jalen Wright, Devin Achan does have an extra week to get healthy. I doubt that they would bump Devin Achan out of the rotation if he was healthy to go, but probably something to watch. A fortuitous bye week for the Dolphins. Tua would not be eligible till week 8, so no matter what, when they come back next week, it'll either be Thompson or Huntley, but I think they'll probably stick with Huntley, don't you?
I don't think they're going back to Skylar Thompson.
Meanwhile, Patriots 10 points. Ramondre Stevenson gets in the end zone, does have a lion's share of the carry, so all the talk about him getting benched for Antonio Gibson, maybe a little bit of folly, but they are making a change at quarterback. We are thrusting Drake May into the starting lineup. The good news in week 6, they are at home. The bad news for them, they're against a Texans team that dominated and at times obliterated the Buffalo Bills offense on Sunday. So Drake May, come on down to the slaughter, or you getting excited?
You know, it's the old shooting fish in a barrel. I get that you want to get your rookie experience, but I don't know. It seems like Gerard Mayo is trying to like outsmart everybody, and he's only outsmarting himself. This whole we're going to bench Ramondre Stevenson and start Gibson, and then they split snaps 50-50, but the touches were 16-7 in Stevenson's favor, and Stevenson looked good. Now Gibson looked good running the ball too at 6 carries for 52 yards, but I mean, Ramondre with 4 targets, only 3 yards, but it wasn't even like they're like, look, we're going to use Ramondre to run it and Gibson to catch it. It was just like, no, we're going to use Ramondre to run and catch it, and we're going to give Gibson table scraps. I know we said he was the starter, but really I was just trying to make a point to Ramondre, and see, it worked. He didn't fumble. Oh, by the way, let's go get our rookie quarterback killed next week.
Yeah, something to look forward to. Meanwhile, a rookie quarterback who is thriving is Jaden Daniels in Washington. They hosted the Browns and got the 34-13 victory. Dennis, the Browns are now 1-4. Deshaun Watson has yet to throw for 200 yards in a game. He's right below, I believe, 60% completion percentage. Kevin Stefanski said they are sticking with him, but should they?
Well, we saw what happened with Robert Saleh. So I got to be honest, I feel like Stefanski's not far behind right now.
I was wrong. He's right at 60.2% completion, 852 yards, 5 TDs, 3 INTs in 5 games.
I mean, 125 yards passing last week. I saw a post out there because Amari Cooper has had a tough year, and even this week, he had 10 targets, but he only caught 4 for 60. And I think it was Warren Sharp that posted it. Something like 45 or 50% of Amari Cooper's targets have been deemed uncatchable. And it's like, he's like, that's the highest we've seen by a long ways.
Well, and Deshaun Watson already taken 26 sacks in 5 games. That's an average, and I know they've had offensive line woes, but he doesn't look good. It's hard for me to imagine that Jameis Winston would be worse. And, maybe you get some YOLO Bowl, maybe you get some life going, because it's got to be killing that defense too.
Jameis is going to be productive. He's going to force the ball down the field. Maybe getting Chubb back changes some things up, but Jerome Ford hasn't been terrible. I don't think he gives you the same kind of, you can't just rely on him. Like Ford had 9 carries, Foreman had 9 carries. They averaged 4.9 and 5.2 yards per carry. So they were productive in the amount of time they had. But given that Washington was up so far, I'm not sure how sophisticated a defense was being thrown at them. I think you bench Watson and you put Jameson there and see what he can do. See if he lights a fire under the team.
Meanwhile, veteran Austin Eckler, we've talked a lot about Brian Robinson. He was a little banged up with his knee, so I think they didn't throw him out there a ton. He did get 2 rushing touchdowns, so your day was okay. But Eckler back, 6 carries, 67 yards, a couple of receptions for 30 yards. How are you feeling about him week to week?
Dude, he looked slow on that 50-yard run.
Yes,
he looked like Kalen Saunders on that interception last night out there. God bless him, but he's one of those guys right now that's getting by on instinct. He isn't going to run away from people. He's going to be in the right spot, doing the right thing. You need him to be in the flat and get you 4 yards. He'll get you 4 yards. But I don't think we're going to see a whole lot of those 50-yard breakaways the rest of the year from him. He looked slow.
On to what was a pretty high-scoring game. The Jacksonville Jaguars get their first win of the season, 37-34 over the Indianapolis Colts. Dennis, for the Colts, we saw Joe Flacco in there again, and that has been a good thing for Josh Downs. He had 9 for 69, had 8 for 82 and a touchdown the week before, now has 20 receptions on the season. Are you buying into him at all, or do you need to see it with Anthony Richardson first?
As long as Flacco's in there, I'm definitely buying. But last year,
Richardson may not be this week.
Richardson had a little bit of a connection with Josh Downs last year as well. So I'm not too concerned. I don't know if he'll get 12 targets from Anthony Richardson. I also don't know that Anthony Richardson's going to throw the ball 44 times. But if Richardson throws the ball 28 to 32 times, I think Downs will be a viable flex play.
Meanwhile, for the Jaguars, one of their heroes was Tank Bigsby, 13 carries, 101 yards, and 2 touchdowns, including a 65-yard touchdown scamper. How you feeling about Bigsby?
Dude almost got Leon Ledded on that long touchdown. He kind of slowed down, pointing back, looked over his shoulder, and those dudes, he's like, oh, these dudes are close. I'm a Tank Bigsby fan. I love the comeback after the rookie year that he had, where it seemed like every time he touched the ball, it bounced into a defender's hands for an interception or fumble. He's not – is he a special – he's in the Brian Robinson mold. He's not a special player. He's a good player. He's in the NFL. He's a guy that's going to give you some good games. I don't expect a lot of 65-yard runs from him, but he runs hard. He's got good size. He can catch the ball a little bit. If Travis Etienne is dinged up a little bit, I think that just gives Jacksonville some confidence that they can take it easy on Etienne. They don't have to overwork him. And then if you remember when Urban Meyer drafted Travis Etienne, he's like, we view him as a pass catcher, and maybe that's what they're going to do. They're going to run Etienne a little more. They're going to use or run Bigsby a little more, use Etienne a little more in the passing game. Etienne doesn't have a lot of wiggle. He's got some great straight line speed. But this week, Bigsby was 40% of the snaps, had 14 touches. Etienne was 38%. He had 13 touches. So I think you're going to see both of them going forward, which really, if you drafted Etienne at his ADP, you hate that. But if you drafted Bigsby at his ADP, then you're like, hey, I've got a free flex play.
Yeah, and he's been making the most of it. Had 90 yards in week 4, 113, a couple touchdowns. I would say, though, we may have seen his best game of the season.
Oh, yeah. I wouldn't surprise me one bit.
On to the Houston Texans, who got the 23-20 win over the Bills. Dennis, Buffalo was 3-0. They were cruising seemingly on offense the last couple of weeks. It's been a lot more bumps in the road. Is their offense just in a little funk, or do you think they're missing something?
It's in a big funk. Josh Allen completing 30% of his passes. Now, I get it. He got a touchdown. Now, I think they structured their team thinking we can use that Kansas City Kelsey model, and Dalton Kincaid hasn't matured into that yet. If you remember, it took Kelsey about 3 years, and this is only Kincaid's second year. And when Kelsey started out there, maybe not. I think he didn't start there with Hill. But I think they may have had Dwayne Bowe when he started, when Kelsey came into the league. But I think Buffalo needs somebody a receiver to open things up for Dalton Kincaid. And that receiver was Khalil Shakir. I talked a couple weeks ago about how favorably he comps to Amon-Ra St. Brown, and not having him last week. I love Curtis Samuel. He's a Buckeye. He's not the answer. Mac Hollins and MVS, another one of my faves. They're not the answer. I think Keon Coleman is a little bit of, there's a little Gabe Davis to his game. And I think they need Shakir, or they need somebody else to step up and be that number one wide receiver to allow Kincaid to do what Kelsey does. And they don't have that right now. And so it's causing some stumbles for the offense. I love what James Cook is doing. Super productive in the running game and passing game. If you have to roster one asset in that Buffalo offense right now, James Cook is it.
Well, Josh Allen.
Well, I mean, that goes without saying.
I do think you're right. Maybe this will be a little bit of a growth. We've seen in spurts some good things from Keon Coleman. They were missing Khalil Shakir on Sunday, and I think he's been like one of their most steady pass catchers. I think as those two kind of come along, and Dalton Kincaid, maybe they'll get a little bit stronger, but that's a little bit, it's been amazing. Josh Allen, one of the knocks against him the last few years has been turnovers. He has not thrown an interception in 5 games, but his completion percentage is down. And you have to think a little bit of that is the receivers and the groups and stuff out there. So maybe they need, the first 3 weeks, we've seen now Arizona is a defense you can come back on. Miami kind of had fallen apart, and Jacksonville was in a horrible strait. So it was kind of a nice schedule for them at the beginning. Then going to Baltimore and to Houston hasn't been quite as favorable. They go to the New York Jets in week 6, so that should be a fun matchup. Meanwhile, for the Texans, Nico Collins caught 2 for 78 and a touchdown, including a 67-yard scoring strike, and left with an injury. He downgraded from day to day to week. Some are suggesting it's going to be difficult for him to get on the field in week 6. Dennis, if he misses, who do you think is the beneficiaries there in the passing game?
Diggs, baby. It's we've seen it. And Dell too. It'll be, it's an embarrassment of riches in Houston. So Diggs will be the number one guy. He's sitting at wide receiver 8 on the season. Dell's back and he's healthy. If they can get Joe Mixon back to goose that running game, that would be amazing for them, because though the downside of it is Dario Gumbawale has made himself into a flex play in the receiving game. But I think they were running after Collins went out. Xavier Hutchinson stepped into his role, a second-year guy out of Iowa State, I think, who's got some potential, but he's certainly not Nico Collins. But yeah, it'll be Stephon Diggs who will lead the way.
So on to the next game, and I don't get to say this very often, but the Denver Broncos thumped the Las Vegas Raiders 34-18. Another game where Gardner Minshew got the hook due to being ineffective. They put in Aiden O'Connell. I will tell you, he was not much more effective. They have not made a decision about quarterback going forward. Should they give Aiden O'Connell a shot?
I mean, it's like one of them is heads, one of them is tails. They're the same damn quarterback.
I mean, O'Connell was not terrible in his starts and had a winning record last year. Given what I saw of Gardner Minshew, I do think it would be worth giving Aiden O'Connell a shot, especially since you're likely to trade Devontae Adams. They lost Christian Wilkins for the rest of the year. I mean, I don't think they're going anywhere.
I mean, it's you got to feel for Antonio Pierce. You know, he coached his butt off last year, earned the job, and then
instead of taking a quarterback, they took a tight end.
Yeah. Now, don't get me wrong, Brock Bowers has been great, but they needed a quarterback. I think you could have got by with Michael Mayer.
Yeah. Although he's oddly, we haven't talked about it much. He's away from the team for personal reasons. So.
Oh, is he? I thought he got injured.
Wish him the best. Meanwhile, another rookie quarterback that's starting to round into form, Bo Nix, 19-27, 206 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Got a rushing TD because gutless Sean Payton won't let Javonte Williams finish a drive, but that's an argument for another day. How are we feeling about Nix?
So I want to feel good, and as somebody who has to play Bo Nix occasionally, I feel good about his growth and his mobility and ability to run the ball. However, from a real broad fantasy perspective, completing passes to 11 different receivers on just 27 attempts just kills fantasy teams. And you need to narrow that funnel.
He completed 5 of them to Javonte, so.
He did, and that's great. And 5 to Cortland Sutton as well, or targeted Sutton 5 times. But, I mean, there's too many players.
Yeah, I mean, he would have had quite a bigger day. He delivered a beautiful long touchdown strike to Troy Franklin, who apparently doesn't have hands. It's really sad to see a professional receiver born without hands, but he's doing.
Well, you got to be impressed with all he's overcome.
Yeah,
to get there without hands.
No hands. I think he's okay, but I still have him, in the low end QB2 ranks. I'm not getting too excited. Denver wins and it cuts me to my soul to say this because Vance Joseph deserves to be assistant coach of the year. He went from right around this time last year, giving up 70 points to the Dolphins. And every day I campaigned on Twitter for him to be fired and the GM to be fired, and they didn't fire him. And I guess thank God for that, because they got rid of all of his big name players except for Pat Surtain. And he's taken this, upstart group. We lost our best and really only good middle linebacker 2 weeks ago. And all we've done is beat the Jets and stone the Raiders. It's Vance Joseph, and Sean Payton ought to get on his knees every night and say a little prayer of thanksgiving that Vance Joseph came to him as well. We had some really weird results in the afternoon window on Sunday, and one of those was the Arizona Cardinals coming from way behind to beat the San Francisco 49ers in San Francisco 24-23. Dennis, what do you make of this Cardinals team?
So it felt like there was a blown coverage, a blown assignment on Murray's 50-yard touchdown,
Yeah.
And he had those little elf legs going as fast as he could to get down there to the end zone. But I mean, he only threw for 195 yards. Michael Wilson, I think he's a solid number 2 receiver. Trey McBride, nine targets, 6 catches, 53 yards. You love that. Marvin Harrison had 7 targets, but only converted 2 of them. So the opportunities are there. So they're doing what they're supposed to. They're getting the ball to their top 3 receivers. James Conner had 3 catches, ran the ball, or 3 targets, ran the ball 19 times. Nice narrow funnel, just what you like to see. They eked it out, and they had a couple lucky plays, and I think that's going to kind of be part and parcel for the Arizona season. I don't expect them to have a winning record at the end of the year, but I think they're going to have they're going to find out who they are, where their weaknesses are. I think they've got some really solid pieces on offense. They could probably use another offensive lineman. Kelvin Beacham's getting up there in age. Paris Johnson looks like he's going to be just fine. So they've got some potential. I heard somebody say on one of the Sunday shows or Sunday recaps, that Arizona is going to, they're going to struggle around the league, but the team is built to beat Seattle, San Francisco, and the Rams. They're built to play in their division, and
they already lost to the Rams. So,
right.
And I think they already lost to the Seahawks.
It's like the NFC North or the AFC North. These teams kind of, you're going to play these teams.
Oh, wait. I was wrong. They beat the Rams and the 49ers. They've lost to everybody else. So, well, maybe that person was right. I feel like they have some pieces, but they're not reliable. That's
right. And that comes with maturity, I think.
Yeah. Meanwhile, now 2-3. Is it time to worry about the 49ers?
I don't think so. They're a good team. They're missing Christian McCaffrey. That covers up a lot, having McCaffrey. But Jordan
They're a
Mason,
sloppy team, though.
Yeah, but isn't that kind of a Kyle Shanahan trait?
No, I would not say that about the last couple of years. They've been very precise. They've always been great in big games.
Years. I mean, if you look back over Shanahan's career, I think you see after his teams will get sloppy.
I mean, the only place he's been a head coach is San Francisco.
Right, but the offense, I'm talking about the offenses where he's been an OC.
I don't know if I agree about that either.
Okay, be wrong. I don't care. So, I think they've got a lot of weapons. They started slow with, is it Trent Williams, their left tackle?
Yeah.
Missing all of camp, and Ayuk missing all of camp. They're going to, and then, the whole, he'll be fine if it was a playoff game, he'd have played fiasco with Christian McCaffrey. Oh, but he's not going to play. He's actually going to go to Germany and have voodoo science done on both of his Achilles. Jordan Mason stepped up and played really well. And I think Isaac Guerrero has, moved right into that backup role behind him. It's, the running backs have done really well with next man up. I think that because Mason and Guerrero are not Christian McCaffrey, it's allowed more targets to the passing game. I'd like to see a little more even distribution, than 12-12-4-3. But, it is what it is. You throw the ball to the open guy.
That's certainly true. Next up, the Packers got the 24-19 victory over the Rams, but let's talk about Romeo Doubs. He sat out practice, obviously in a dispute with the team, who ended up suspending him for a game. Is this kind of a worrying sign or just a hiccup?
I think it's a hiccup. Doubs is a good player. He may not be as good as he thinks he is, I think Bo Melton can step in and do Romeo Dobbs' job. Jaden Reed is the top dog there. And Dontavian Wicks, 7 targets. He just didn't convert. I think if Dobbs had played, if he hadn't been kind of a punk about things, then I think he'd have been pleasantly surprised with his opportunities. But they looked at, where the matchups were, what they had. Tucker Kraft versus the Rams, that was good. Jaden Reed has got, he's a versatile player. I think there's something to be said for understanding some weeks it's just not your week, and you just got to be ready when you're called on, and then you make a play.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see how it goes. He has not had a great season so far, only 12 receptions in the 4 games that he played. So maybe it'll light a spark, though. We shall see. Rams now down to 1-4, but they look like they are going to get Cooper Kupp back when they come off of their bye week, which is this next week. If Kupp comes back, based on what you've seen of how they've hung in there in games, do you think that they can rally?
I think they can. They've been riding Kyren Williams. He's RB4 on the year. And we know that's what they're going to do. Blake Corum actually got carries this week. So, they've decided they're going to share the ball a little bit with somebody that's not Ronnie Rivers. No, but, let's face it. Jordan Whittington and Tutu Atwell and Demarcus Robinson are not Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. So getting Cooper Kupp back, we've seen them operate with just one of those elite players. And so I think we'll see that again. Kupp will step right back in. He'll have 15 targets or 30 targets. Who knows? Whittington will keep doing what he's doing. I think it was crazy to look and see that Colby Parkinson had 13 targets last week. That was a big old number.
That is quite a few. The Rams on a bye this week. The New York Giants went into Seattle and got the 29-20 victory, kind of somewhat of a surprise. Singletary was out with an injury, but they did not miss him. Tyrone Tracy, 18 carries, 129 yards, caught 1 pass for 1 yard. Even when Singletary is back healthy, do you think we will see a little bit more of Tracy?
So it depends on whether or not Brian Daboll subscribes to the philosophy that you earn touches, because I think Tyrone Tracy earned some opportunity. He was explosive. He ran the ball well. He looked more natural as a running back than many of the wide receiver converts that we've seen in the last few years. Antonio Gibson, Tony Pollard. He looked good as a running back. He's got good size. I think that he will continue to earn touches. Tracy was RB18 this week. Singletary was RB24 weeks 1 through 4. I know you watched the off-season Giants TV show and that Singletary was their guy. But you got to look at the production that Tracy had and the explosiveness that he has and be like, yeah, Singletary's our guy, but we're going to give this other dude the ball.
Well, we thought Tracy would have somewhat of a chance when we were going into the preseason. But for me in the preseason, the one that kind of stood out was Eric Gray, who I thought that they would work in a little bit. I never thought they were going to turn Devin Singletary into a bell cow, because that didn't make a whole lot of sense. But for a while there to start this season, that is seemingly what they had done. But I do like what we saw from Tracy. I think they need some kind of spark, and I think that they could run both of them together.
Well, and I think, too, that Eric Gray looked decent in the passing game. And not for nothing, I'm sitting at number 73 in the Scott Fish Bowl out of 3,996 teams. in large part due to having to start Eric Gray in my running back spot this week because Jonathan Taylor was out, and they've got this crazy return scoring. Gray had 18 points for me.
Oh, really? I guess I didn't see his returns. I started great too, and he started out well, and then he fumbled the ball, which, and then that combined with how well Tracy was doing, kind of led them to pick it up. So, meanwhile, Seahawks, they were so good on Monday night against Detroit. Do you think it was just a little bit of a being flat and coming off of that game?
It could be, it seems like a wild game plan to just have 7 rush attempts by your running backs in a game that wasn't really out of reach. So Walker had 7 carries for 57 yards, or no, receiving.
Walker had 5 carries for 19, and they had 2 for Charbonnet.
Yeah, but in the receiving game, Walker had 8 targets, 7 catches for 57, and Charbonnet had 3 for 5 for 19. So it felt like I don't understand. To me, like the Giants' defense isn't that good, and so to just completely abandon the running game was, I don't know. I just didn't get it. I'm not sure. It felt like I'm going to outsmart everybody, and they'll never see it coming. And
except for everybody tries to throw on the Giants. And, of course, DK Metcalf, second week in a row with a fumble.
He's got to, sometimes you just got to,
he's going to find
go down.
He's going to find some stickum in his locker. Sunday Night Football, the Dallas Cowboys went into Pittsburgh and got the 20-17 victory. This game delayed by almost 2 hours because of weather. So I literally only watched the first half. I was kind of surprised that the Cowboys won, but they did it thanks to Brandon Cooks is out on IR, but they had some stepping up from Kevontae Turpin and especially Jalen Tolbert, who saw 10 targets, got 7 for 87 and a touchdown. Do you like Tolbert going forward?
Yeah, Tolbert felt like the successor to Brandon Cooks as the wide receiver 2 in Dallas. He's been there a couple years. I think this is his 3rd year. I know last year a lot of people were high on him, and it just didn't pan out. I think he's a good route runner. He's a serviceable wide receiver. Will he ever be a superstar? Probably not. But then again, he's playing across from CeeDee Lamb, who's one of the best in the game right now. So I like Tolbert. I think he's somebody that, especially as long as Brandon Cooks is out on a team that's fairly high volume passing, that I think Tolbert is probably flex worthy most weeks.
Meanwhile, for the Steelers, this felt like an opportunity for Justin Fields to kind of salt the starting job away, but there was a lot of talk even during the game about the looming decision with Russell Wilson looking like he is going to be healthy enough to play in week 6. They're 3-2. It was kind of a middling game for Fields against a diminished Dallas defense. What do you think they're going to do at quarterback?
I think they start Fields again this week, but I think he's got a short leash. If he's not putting up points, he's got to win to keep the job. That doesn't mean he won't get it back if Russ can't win. It just means that they brought Russ in first, and then they had the opportunity to get Fields, and it was like, well, let's do this too. It'll be our hedge. And then Russ injured his calf, and Fields played well the first 3 games. The last couple games haven't been quite as good. He threw the ball to Pickens 7 times. Some of those, were of the Deshaun Watson variety, and I question the catchability of them. And Pickens is one of those guys, if you don't get him involved early, he could completely disappear from the game. So it was tough. And then to only run Najee Harris 14 times against that depleted front, I don't know. Again, it was another weird game plan, but then again, it's Arthur Smith. So
I actually think there's a good chance they are going to start Russ this week.
wouldn't surprise me, but
Yeah. I was pulling for Fields, but I think it was a little missed opportunity. Monday Night Football, the Chiefs moved to 5-0, 26-13 victory over the Saints. Dennis Derek Carr got knocked out late with an injury. Jake Haener had to finish up that game. Carr is going to have more tests this week, but it is a short week. If he can't go, how are we feeling about this offense potentially with Jake Haener?
Man, I can't wait to see Spencer Rattler.
You think they'll do Rattler or Haener, though?
No, they'll start Haener. Rattler will be the backup.
This might be the tonic that Tampa Bay's defense needs to get better.
Ain't that the truth? No, Spencer Rattler is a pretty good prospect. He's got a big arm, makes some questionable decisions. So he should have been drafted by Las Vegas with the way he makes decisions sometimes. New Orleans going against the Tampa defense that gives up a lot of passing yards, but not a lot of passing touchdowns. And the Tampa defense is susceptible to the run. So let's hope Alvin Kamara is feeling healthy, and then maybe they'll be able to kind of keep things close. But, I mean, Jake Haener, it feels like a situation where they – with a short prep time, Haener's the guy that they were going to go with. But if Carr is out week 8, I feel like we'll see Spencer Rattler start that game. Or we're going into week 6. If Carr's out week 7.
Yeah, and I have to look. They may actually be on a bye. Oh, so interesting enough, they have Sunday, but then they play the following Thursday at home against the Broncos. So they have a very tight window of 2 games in 10 days, which is a real and I guess a test did confirm that Derek Carr he is out indefinitely due to an oblique injury. MRI confirmed an oblique injury. He is out definitely. They do not have a timeline for when he might return. It's usually a multi-week absence. The Saints play 2 games in 10 days.
You know who doesn't injure their oblique? Offensive linemen. Yeah. They don't injure their obliques.
Well, it'll be interesting to see. My only question is, when you go from a Sunday to a Thursday game, you don't have much time to install. Like if we knew Carr was going to be on the week after and we saw enough of Jake Haener to know that wasn't going to work, I don't know if they have enough time to replace quarterbacks if it doesn't pan out for them.
Right.
They do have 2 home games in a row, though, so something to benefit them. Meanwhile, for the Chiefs, they turned back the Wayback Machine. Juju Smith-Schuster, 8 targets, caught 7 passes for 130 yards. Are you buying in? Rashee Rice is definitely out for the year. They confirmed that today.
It's hard not to, right? Until they make a move for somebody else.
I mean, it looked very 2022. It was him and Mecole Hardman and Travis Kelce, and then they took a couple shots downfield with Worthy playing the MVS role. It looked very 2022.
Yeah, I see a lot of people trying to connect like Christian Kirk there, which would be great. I think he would fit.
I don't think the Jags are ready to give up, though.
No, I don't think so either.
Because that would be Doug Peterson giving up on his job.
Right. But, the thing with Juju is he's very much like Kyren Williams. You got to ride him. Just keep riding him until that knee gives out. And it's gonna. You're not going to put him out there running 80, 90% routes on that knee with, 8 or 9 targets and catches getting hit and expect him to hold up for the next 12 games. So
the other thing for me is I don't think any team, unless the Chiefs are willing to overpay, wants to trade a marquee player to them.
Why would you? I mean,
no, but they shouldn't want to. But I mean, unless Kansas City is out there willing to give up a massive overpay. I don't know. Like, do you think Cincinnati wants to give T. Higgins to Kansas City just to watch Kansas City going around? I don't think they do, even though, and we already heard from the Raiders that there was a snowball's chance down under they were going to send Devontae Adams there. So, your choices are kind of, I don't know what robust market there even would be out there for trading. So
Find some poor NFC team.
Deontay Johnson, come on down. Not sure that would be an improvement. Before we get out of here, Thursday night football this week, we have the 2-3 reeling San Francisco 49ers at the 3-2 reeling Seattle Seahawks. Both of these teams are desperate for a win. How are you feeling about this game?
I want to feel optimistic because there's good fantasy players on both sides of the ball. But the Seattle defense gives up just 183 passing yards per game. That's 24th in the league. And they've got the fourth highest sack rate at 9.9%. So they can get after the quarterback. But they give up the 13th most rush yards and 11th most rushing TDs. So it feels like it'll be, well, it should, you want it to be a high-scoring game, and you look at all these fantasy assets and think, oh, this can be a high-scoring game. But the reality is it's going to be geared towards the run. So giving up, let's see, Seattle gives up the 10th fewest fantasy points to wide receivers and are middle of the pack versus tight ends. So it just feels like a Jordan Mason game. And then
he doesn't fumble.
Is it going to be Ayuk or is it going to be Debo? Because it feels like it's going to be one of them.
Yep.
Which is probably going to be Jennings.
Yeah, it was Ayuk last week, so law of averages would tell you it's Debo. Kittle was pretty good last week, too. I am taking the 49ers in this one.
Well, you want to talk about the Seahawks, too?
Well, I just asked you how you felt about the game. We just talked about these teams, so.
Oh, well, I did a little research on Seattle. So they give up the third most passing yards, but just the 19th most passing touchdowns. And Geno has taken the third most sacks in the NFL. So the Niners defense is going to get after Geno. Can he get out of it? Can Kenneth Walker run good enough to keep him honest? It feels like it's going to be the Niners by a touchdown. I think the Seahawks will make a couple plays, and I think their defense is good enough that the Niners won't be able to run away with it.
Yeah, I mean, the 49ers already 0-2 in the division. Can't really afford to go 0-3 or start 2-4. That would be somewhat grim. So we shall see. Hopefully it'll be a good game. But as you mentioned last week, we had an awesome game last week. So probably the next 3 Thursday nights will be duds.
Probably.
We will be back on Friday. We will see who else manages to get fired or benched or promoted to a starting position between now and then. There are still a lot of questions, surprisingly, plus a lot of injuries and 4 more teams on the bye. So stay tuned. Another London game. We're sending the Jaguars and the Bears to London this week. So plenty to look forward to. But until then, hopefully you guys have a wonderful week.
Toodaloo.